This message found you for a reason. Your soulmate is awakening. This message didn't come to you by accident, and maybe a part of you already knows that. Out of everything you could have been doing right now, out of all the distractions, all the noise, all the random moments scrolling through life, this is what stopped you. Not because it forced you to, but because something inside you felt it. Something quiet, something deep, something you can't fully explain, but you recognize it. And maybe that's been happening a lot lately. These small, unexplainable moments where you feel a pull, where your thoughts drift toward someone you don't talk to, someone you can't fully have, someone who exists in your life in a way that doesn't make sense to anyone else. You try to brush it off, you try to stay practical, you tell yourself to focus on what's real and present, but no matter how much you try, there's this constant presence that doesn't leave. Not loudly, not in a way that disrupts everything, but quietly, consistently, like a feeling that has made a home inside you. And the more you try to understand it, the more you realize, this isn't something ordinary. This isn't just attraction, this isn't just attachment, and it's definitely not something you can explain with logic alone. This is something deeper, something that feels like it existed even before you became aware of it. You felt it the first time in a way that caught you off guard. Maybe it wasn't dramatic. Maybe there were no big confessions, no obvious signs, no moment where everything suddenly changed. Maybe it was subtle, a conversation that felt too easy, a silence that felt too comfortable, a look, a vibe, an energy that made you pause for a second longer than usual. And in that pause, something shifted. Something within you recognized them, not as a stranger, not as just another person passing through your life, but as someone who felt familiar in a way you couldn't explain. It didn't make sense, and maybe that's why you ignored it at first. Because how do you explain feeling connected to someone without a reason? How do you justify emotions that don't follow any timeline, any rule, any structure? So you told yourself it was nothing. You told yourself it would pass. You convinced yourself that you were overthinking, that it was just a moment, just a phase, but time didn't erase it. If anything, time made it clearer. Because no matter how much distance came between you, no matter how much you tried to focus on your own life, your own routine, your own responsibilities, they stayed. Not always in your conscious thoughts, not always in a way you could immediately notice, but in the background of everything. In the songs that suddenly felt personal. In the quiet moments when your mind wandered without permission. In the random memories that showed up without warning. And that's when it started to feel different. Not like something new, but like something that had always been there, just waiting for you to notice it. And maybe the hardest part wasn't feeling it. It was understanding what to do with it. Because this wasn't a simple situation. This wasn't a love that came with open doors and easy choices. There were boundaries. There were realities you couldn't ignore. They had their own life, their own commitments, their own path that didn't have space for what you were feeling. And that's where everything inside you started to struggle. Because your heart doesn't care about circumstances, it only knows what it feels. But your mind, your values, your sense of right and wrong, they do care. And suddenly, you were standing in the middle of something that felt both incredibly real and completely impossible at the same time. You could have ignored those boundaries. You could have followed your feelings without thinking about the consequences. You could have chosen the temporary happiness of being close to them, even if it meant creating chaos in the long run. But you didn't. You stopped yourself. Again and again. Even when it hurt. Even when it would have been easier not to. And that choice, that quiet, invisible choice, is something most people will never understand. Because the world often glorifies chasing love, fighting for it, doing whatever it takes to keep it. But it rarely talks about the kind of love that chooses restraint. The kind of love that says, I feel this deeply, but I will not let it harm anyone. The kind of love that values integrity over desire, even when the desire feels overwhelming. And that's the kind of love you experienced. Do you realize how rare that is? To feel something so strong and still choose not to act on it, not because it isn't real, but because it is real, and you respect it enough not to turn it into something messy or destructive. That's not weakness. That's strength on a level most people never reach. But strength doesn't mean it didn't affect you. It did. In ways you're still trying to understand. Because when you hold something in instead of expressing it, it doesn't disappear, it transforms. It turns into late-night thoughts, into quiet emotions, into moments where you feel something you can't explain to anyone around you. It becomes a part of your inner world, a space that only you can access, where this connection exists without judgment, without rules, without limitations. And in that space, they are still there. Not physically. Not in your daily life. But in your awareness. And maybe that's what confuses you the most. Because how can someone who isn't present in your life still feel so present within you? The answer is simple, even if it's hard to accept. This is a soul connection. Not the kind people talk about casually. Not the kind that's based on compatibility or shared interests or timing. But the kind that exists beyond all of that. The kind that doesn't need constant interaction to survive. The kind that doesn't fade just because circumstances make it impossible. And connections like that, they don't come into your life to stay the way you expect. They come to awaken you. Because before this, maybe you thought you understood love. Maybe you believed it was about being together, about building something visible, about having clarity and direction. But now you see a different side of it. A deeper side. A quieter side. A side that doesn't need validation from the outside world to be real. You've learned that love can exist without possession. That it can be true without becoming a relationship. That it can change you without staying in your life. And that realization has shifted something inside you forever. You're not the same person you were before this. You feel more. You understand more. You see beyond the surface now. And somewhere, whether you realize it or not, they are changing too. Maybe not in the same way, maybe not as consciously, maybe not as openly, but something within them has shifted. Because soul connections don't affect just one person. They create a ripple, an invisible change that touches both sides, even if it's expressed differently. They might be ignoring it. They might be suppressing it. They might be choosing their life, their responsibilities, their reality. But that doesn't mean they didn't feel it. Because the soul always recognizes what is real, even if the mind tries to deny it. And this is where the awakening begins. Not in a dramatic moment. Not in a confession. Not in something the world can see. But in a quiet, internal shift. A realization that something meaningful happened, even if it wasn't meant to last in the way you once imagined. And now, you're learning to live with that realization. Slowly. Patiently. Day by day. Some days are easier. Some days, you feel at peace, you accept things as they are, you focus on your own life and it feels manageable. And then there are other days, where it all comes back. A memory, a thought, a feeling that hits you without warning, and suddenly, you're right there again, feeling everything as if no time has passed. And that doesn't mean you're going backwards. It means you're human. It means what you felt was real. And real things, they don't just disappear. They stay. But they change form. And maybe, that's what you're starting to understand now. That this connection doesn't need to be acted on to be meaningful. That it doesn't need a future to have been real. That it doesn't need to be explained to anyone else to be valid. It simply is. And maybe that's why this message found you today. Not to give you answers. Not to tell you what will happen next. But to remind you of something you already feel deep inside. That this wasn't ordinary. That you didn't imagine it. That you're not alone in feeling this way. You're just someone who experienced something rare. Something that touched your soul. And changed you forever, and maybe now, as you sit with everything you've felt, everything you've tried to understand, and everything you've quietly carried within you, you're beginning to realize that this connection was never meant to be simple. It was never meant to fit into the neat, predictable structure that most relationships follow. It didn't come with clarity, it didn't come with easy answers, and it definitely didn't come with a path you could clearly see. Instead, it came like a feeling you couldn't ignore, a presence you couldn't define, and a bond that refused to fade, no matter how much distance or silence surrounded it. And that's what makes it so different, because even without constant communication, even without physical closeness, even without a future you can hold on to, it still exists. Quietly. Deeply. Unshaken. There's a part of you that has already accepted the reality of it. You know where things stand. You understand the boundaries. You're aware of the life they've chosen, the responsibilities they carry, and the reasons why this connection cannot turn into something more. And yet, acceptance doesn't erase feeling. Understanding doesn't silence the heart. You can be completely aware of the truth and still feel the pull of something that doesn't belong to your reality. And that's the paradox you've been living with, the balance between knowing and feeling, between accepting and remembering, between letting go and still holding on in a way that no one else can see. But look at how far you've come. There was a time when this consumed you, when every thought circled back to them, when every small interaction felt like it meant something bigger, when you searched for signs, for meaning, for some kind of confirmation that this wasn't just in your head. You questioned everything, your feelings, their actions, the timing, the circumstances. You tried to make sense of something that was never meant to be logical. And in that process, you felt overwhelmed, pulled between hope and reality, between what you wanted and what you knew. But now, something has shifted. You're not chasing answers anymore. You're not trying to force clarity where there is none. You're not holding on to, what if, the way you once did. Instead, you're learning to sit with what is. And that is growth. Because the truth is, not every connection is meant to be solved. Some are meant to be experienced, felt, and then carried forward in a different way. And that's what this is becoming for you, not something you're trying to figure out, but something you're learning to understand without needing to define it completely. There's a quiet maturity in the way you hold this now. You don't talk about it much. You don't need to. Because you've realized that not everything meaningful needs to be explained to others. Some things are too deep, too personal, too complex to put into simple words. And even if you tried, most people wouldn't understand. They would try to fit it into categories, into labels, into something familiar, but this isn't familiar. This is something else entirely. This is the kind of connection that changes how you see everything. It changes how you understand love, not as something you possess, but as something you experience. It changes how you see people, not just on the surface, but on a deeper, more intuitive level. It changes how you view yourself, because you begin to realize how much you're capable of feeling, how much you can hold within you without breaking. And yes, it hurt. It still does, sometimes. But the pain isn't the same anymore. Before, it felt sharp, confusing, overwhelming, like something you needed to escape from. Now, it feels softer. Still present, still real, but not consuming. It's like a quiet ache that reminds you of something meaningful, rather than something you've lost. Because maybe, you didn't lose anything. Maybe you experienced something that wasn't meant to be kept, but was meant to be understood. And that changes everything. Because when you stop seeing it as a loss, you stop feeling like something is missing. You begin to see it as a part of your journey, a chapter that shaped you, taught you, and revealed something within you that you didn't even know existed. And that realization brings a kind of peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from everything working out the way you wanted, but the kind that comes from accepting things as they are, without resistance. You're no longer asking, "Why did this happen to me?" You're starting to understand, "This happened for me." For your growth. For your awareness. For your emotional depth. For your understanding of what real, selfless love looks like. And maybe, even for something that hasn't arrived in your life yet. Because connections like this don't just end, they prepare you. They prepare you for a kind of love that is aligned, available, and real in your world. A love that doesn't come with confusion or distance or impossibility, but with presence, honesty, and mutual choice. And when that love comes, you'll recognize it. Not because it feels exactly the same, but because you've learned the difference between what is real and what is only intense. You've learned that love isn't just about feeling something deeply, it's about being able to live it, share it, and build something with it in a way that doesn't hurt others or yourself. And that lesson came from this. So don't regret it. Don't wish it never happened. Don't try to erase it just because it didn't turn into what you expected. Because it gave you something most people spend their whole lives searching for, a glimpse of something real. Even if it was only for a moment. Even if it couldn't stay. And as for them, they will always be a part of your story. Not as someone you lost. Not as someone you almost had. But as someone who awakened something within you that will never go back to sleep. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's more than enough. Because not all love stories are meant to be lived out loud. Some are meant to be felt deeply, understood slowly, and carried silently. And yours is one of them. So if today, for no reason at all, you felt a wave of emotion, if something inside you felt heavy, or nostalgic, or quietly connected to someone you don't even speak to anymore, don't ignore it. Don't push it away. Just sit with it. Feel it. Acknowledge it. And then gently remind yourself. You've already grown through this. You're already becoming someone stronger because of it. And this connection, it's no longer here to confuse you. It's here to remind you of who you are becoming. And that's exactly why this message found you, and as time keeps moving forward, you begin to notice something even deeper happening within you, something that you couldn't have understood in the beginning, something that only reveals itself after you've sat with the silence long enough. It's not about missing them the way you used to. It's not about constantly thinking of what could have been or replaying every moment in your head. It's something quieter than that, something more settled. It's like the storm inside you has slowly turned into a still ocean, where the waves don't crash anymore but the depth is still there, unchanged. You're not trying to hold on anymore, but you're also not trying to let go in a forceful way. You're simply existing with the truth of what was, without needing to reshape it into something else. And that shift, that calm acceptance, is something only a few people ever truly reach, because most people either cling or run, but you stayed, you felt it fully, and now you're learning to carry it without letting it consume you. And that is where real awakening begins, not in the connection itself, but in what it turns you into afterward. Because now, when you think of them, it's not always heavy. Sometimes it feels almost peaceful, like remembering a place that once meant everything to you. There's a softness in it now, a quiet understanding that what you shared didn't need to become something more to be valid. It existed, it was real, and it left its mark. And maybe that mark isn't something you're supposed to erase. Maybe it's something you're supposed to grow around. Because every experience like this expands you in ways you can't immediately see. It changes the way you love, the way you trust, the way you understand yourself. It makes you more aware of your boundaries, more respectful of other people's lives, more conscious of what truly matters beyond temporary emotions. And slowly, without even realizing it, you start becoming someone who doesn't just feel deeply, but also understands deeply. Someone who doesn't just want love, but wants the right kind of love. And that distinction is important, because what you felt with them was real, but it wasn't meant to be lived in the way your heart once imagined. It was meant to teach you something that only a connection like that could teach. And now that you're learning it, you're beginning to see things more clearly. You're no longer lost in the intensity of it. You're no longer questioning your worth or wondering why things didn't work out. You're starting to realize that it wasn't about you not being enough or the timing being wrong. It was simply about the nature of the connection itself. Some bonds are not designed to become a life, they're designed to awaken one. And once that awakening begins, it doesn't stop just because the person isn't physically present. It continues within you, shaping your thoughts, your decisions, your perspective on everything around you. And that's why, even now, even after distance, even after silence, even after acceptance, it still feels like something is alive within you. Not because you're stuck, but because you've been changed. And change like that doesn't disappear. It integrates into who you are. It becomes a part of your emotional intelligence, your strength, your awareness. And maybe, for the first time, you're beginning to appreciate that. You're beginning to see that this wasn't just about longing or pain, it was also about growth. Deep, uncomfortable, transformative growth that forced you to face parts of yourself you might have never explored otherwise. It made you sit with your emotions instead of running from them. It made you question your desires instead of blindly following them. It made you choose what is right, even when it felt wrong in your heart. And that kind of growth, it's rare. It doesn't come from easy experiences. It comes from the ones that challenge you, the ones that stay with you, the ones that don't give you clear answers but still leave you with undeniable truths. And now, as you stand here in this version of yourself, you're not the same person who first felt that connection. You've evolved. You've softened in some ways and strengthened in others. You've learned that love is not always about being together, and you've also learned that letting go doesn't always mean losing something. Sometimes, letting go means honoring something exactly as it was, without trying to change it into something it was never meant to be. And that realization brings a quiet kind of freedom. Not the kind that feels like everything is over, but the kind that feels like everything is understood. You don't need more from them. You don't need a different ending. You don't need closure in the way you once thought you did. Because what you needed, you've already received. You just didn't recognize it at the time. And maybe that's the final stage of this awakening, not when the feelings disappear, but when they no longer create confusion within you. When you can feel it without questioning it, remember it without getting lost in it, and carry it without it becoming a weight. And that's where you are now, whether you fully realize it or not. You're not broken. You're not incomplete. You're not waiting for something to fix this. You're simply integrating an experience that was never meant to be ordinary. And as you continue moving forward, you'll notice that life starts opening up in new ways. Not because this connection is gone, but because it has done its work within you. It has prepared you, shaped you, and brought you to a place where you can now experience life with a deeper sense of clarity and purpose. And when new connections come into your life, you won't approach them the same way you used to. You won't get lost in intensity alone. You won't ignore reality for the sake of emotion. You'll look for something that aligns not just with your heart, but with your life. Something that doesn't require you to sacrifice your peace or your values. Something that can exist fully, openly, and honestly. And when that happens, you'll understand why this had to unfold the way it did. Not as a missed opportunity, but as a necessary step in your journey. Because without this, you wouldn't be who you are now. And who you are now, is someone stronger, wiser, and more aware than ever before. So don't look back at this connection with sadness. Look at it with respect. Look at it as something that awakened you, something that changed you, something that helped you become the person you were always meant to be. And even if a part of you will always feel connected to them in some quiet, unspoken way, that doesn't stop you from moving forward. It doesn't hold you back. It simply becomes a part of your story, a chapter that shaped you, but doesn't define your entire life. And maybe, that's the most powerful realization of all. That you can carry something meaningful without being controlled by it. That you can love without needing to possess. That you can remember without needing to return. And that kind of understanding, that kind of emotional depth, is something very few people ever truly reach. And you did. That's why this message found you. Not to remind you of what you lost, but to show you who you've become because of it. This message found you for a reason. Your soulmate is awakening, final part, and now, after everything you've felt, everything you've questioned, everything you've silently carried within your heart, you're finally arriving at a place that once felt impossible to reach, a place where the love is still there, but the pain no longer controls you. A place where the memories still exist, but they don't break you the way they once did, a place where you can finally look at this connection not as something that left you incomplete, but as something that quietly made you whole in a way nothing else ever could. Because the truth is, what you experienced was never about losing or gaining someone, it was never about whether they stayed or whether they left. It was about what happened within you when you felt something so rare, so deep, and so unexplainable that it changed the way you see everything, including yourself. And that kind of change, it doesn't disappear, it doesn't fade, it becomes a part of you, something you carry not as a burden but as a quiet strength that shapes the way you move through life from this point forward. You don't react the same way anymore. You don't get lost in temporary emotions, you don't confuse intensity with truth, because now you know the difference between something that feels strong and something that is actually real. And even though what you had couldn't exist in the way you once hoped, it still gave you clarity that most people spend years searching for. It showed you what your heart is capable of, it showed you how deeply you can love without needing anything in return. And most importantly, it showed you that you have the strength to walk away from something meaningful without turning it into something destructive. And that realization, that quiet understanding, is what sets you apart now, because not everyone can hold love and let go at the same time, not everyone can feel something so deeply and still choose peace over possession, but you did. And that choice has transformed you in ways you're only beginning to fully understand. There was a time when you thought healing meant forgetting, when you believed that moving forward meant erasing what you felt, but now you see it differently. Now you understand that healing is not about losing the memory or disconnecting from the feeling, it's about changing your relationship with it, it's about reaching a point where it no longer creates confusion or longing, but instead exists as a calm, steady truth within you. And that's exactly where you are now, even if you haven't fully acknowledged it yet. You're no longer searching for answers, you're no longer waiting for something to change, you're no longer hoping for a different outcome. You've stepped out of that cycle completely, and in doing so, you've given yourself something far more valuable than closure. You've given yourself freedom. Freedom from overthinking, freedom from emotional dependence, freedom from the constant pull of, what if, and that freedom allows you to finally focus on your own life in a way you couldn't before. Because for the first time, your energy is no longer tied to something that doesn't belong to your reality, it's returning back to you, slowly but surely, and as it does, You begin to notice new things, new possibilities, new perspectives that were always there but were overshadowed by the intensity of what you were feeling. And this is where your real journey begins, not the one connected to them, but the one connected to yourself, because everything you went through was preparing you for this moment, this phase of your life where you are no longer defined by what you couldn't have, but by what you are becoming. And what you are becoming is someone who understands love on a level that goes far beyond surface emotions, someone who values truth over illusion, someone who chooses peace over temporary happiness, someone who knows that real love doesn't require you to lose yourself or compromise your values. And because of that, the love that will come into your life next will not be confusing, it will not be distant, it will not be something you have to hide or question, it will be something that exists openly, honestly, and fully within your reality, something that aligns with your life instead of conflicting with it. And when that happens, you won't compare it to what you felt before, you won't measure one connection against another, because you'll understand that they were never meant to be the same, one was meant to awaken you, and the other will be meant to stay. And both have their own purpose, their own value, their own place in your journey. So don't hold on to the past in a way that keeps you stuck, but also don't deny it in a way that feels forced. Allow it to exist as it is, a meaningful part of your story that helps shape the person you are today. Because at the end of the day, this was never about them as much as it was about you, about your growth, your awareness, your ability to feel something so deeply and still choose what is right. And that is something you should be proud of, not something you should question or doubt. You didn't lose anything, you didn't miss out on something that was meant for you, you experienced something that was never meant to be permanent, but was meant to be powerful, something that came into your life for a reason and left behind exactly what you needed to move forward as a stronger, wiser, and more grounded version of yourself. And maybe, just maybe, that's what awakening truly is, not finding them again, not changing the past, not creating a different ending, but finally understanding the meaning of what happened and allowing it to transform you instead of break you. And now, as you stand here at the end of this chapter, you're not the same person who once felt lost in it, you're someone who has walked through it, felt it fully, learned from it, and come out on the other side with a deeper sense of self than ever before. And that is your power, that is your growth, that is your truth. So if this message found you today, it wasn't to remind you of what you lost, it was to show you how much you've gained, it was to reflect back to you the strength you didn't realize you had, the depth you didn't fully see, and the transformation you've already gone through. You are not waiting anymore, you are not searching anymore, you are not stuck anymore, you are moving forward, carrying love not as a weight, but as a quiet strength within you. And that is exactly where you were always meant to be, because this was never just a story about love, it was a story about awakening, and now, you are finally awake.